1 week before NHL 25 access, and EA finally released one of the biggest, if not the biggest, deep dives for the new game, and it's nothing else than franchise mode. And today I will walk you through all the new features and we'll talk about how excited we are about everything we will see in 1 week's time. Deep dive is 15 minutes long, but I will try to make it very brief and to the point. So what is new in franchise mode in NHL 25? Actually quite a few things. And today we will break it down in 3 categories: franchise hub, contract negotiations, and conversation engine. So let's dive into it. Let's start with new franchise hub. Everything you need in one place. Now you can advance the day, see projected goalies, point leaders in your team and across the league, and also stats to compare your team with the team you're about to face. And all that in one screen. Also at the bottom of the screen there will be a live information feed of everything happening in the league you're currently playing. Something I personally like. For a person who don't really play franchise mode as their main mode, it was always confusing to find all the things where actually they are. And for example, if I want to look at some player specific stats, I always needed to go into the separate screens and search through multiple different players, and to be honest, it was confusing. Everything in one screen will definitely make it more easier for players who are not very familiar with the franchise mode. So if you're opening it for the first time, everything is in one screen. There's a lot of quick access links, so by just with one click you can basically see a lot of new features. On top of that, now we can view the box score from previous games. From the current season, you can view all games and stats. Click on any game and see any information you need with just few clicks. If you're a stat nerd, this feature will be something you will like, as you can dig even deeper and see player individual stats of the game, and every little detail you may need if you're looking at the player performances before making a move or even offering a contract. Another big thing is the game logs. This will allow you to view player performance in each game, each season, and even home or away games. We can now also see the stats against each team, conference, or just the last 10 games. You can also choose individual months to see how the player were performing. And something I personally like the most is award tracking. Now with few clicks we can see the award history of each player starting from the moment they join the league. Even if they change the teams, all awards will carry over and you can view them at any time. And this leads us to the next improvement: contract negotiations. From previous games you probably remember a lot of contracts and what players really wanted didn't make sense. They were not really performing, but they wanted a lot of money. And you actually have to negotiate a lot, and not always you ended up with signing the player. But this year you can actually change that. As you can see, signing players now doesn't just depend on how long the contract is or how much money the player wants. The new contract and organization bar will let us know how much the player wants to join our team, and it will be based on how good the organization is, what is the potential and the vision for the future. But for sure you can negotiate and increase their interest by having a conversation. By offering more money or adding non-movements or non-trades to the certain teams, you can see the interest bar going up and down to see how you're progressing. And as we are talking about the conversations, this leads us to our last point: new conversation engine. Something when I was watching Deep Dive actually made it quite confusing, because obviously EA was talking into much more detail. But to make it brief and to summarize it, it's quite simple. You can now have a chat with any of your players and discuss objectives or even assign long-term or short-term objectives. By achieving some of them, player X-Factor abilities can develop, and that can help them to win more awards. The younger the player, the easier the conversation will be, where league veterans like Crosby or Ovechkin will make you try harder. During the off-season, head coaches can discuss things like position change and any other improvements on the ice you see needed to achieve better results before upcoming season. Even the player playstyles. If you want Rempe to fight less, something you can talk about and suggest, and as I mentioned, the younger the player, the more chances you have he will listen to your suggestions and take them on board. But for sure, any players can refuse and reject it. And if it happens, it will result with a cooldown period where you have to wait before you can talk to them again. So before any conversations, make sure you approach individual players the way you think they would like. There are also improvements on roster management, something community asked for a long time. Now with a few clicks we can see preferred line and lock player into specific roles, allowing more authentic process when a player returns from injury, for example, and can now go back into lineup without replacing him in every line slot. You can also now trade up to 5 years worth of draft picks from a player movement screen to keep the game real and to make sure you don't always have to wait for EA to update the rosters. You can now easily make all the changes yourself, something I believe a lot of guys will love. And here we are at the end of breaking down the franchise deep dive. I think we made it quick and to the point, but if you want to see the full version of franchise deep dive, make sure you watch this video till the end. But before I leave, let me know down in the comment sections below, what do you like or dislike about all the new features, and what do you think about the game in general from the information shared by EA. As always guys, thanks for watching today's video, have a good one and see you on the ice.
Over here we have our brand new Streamlined hub. It's a unique change from previous years. The goal here was to make less tabbing and surface more information for you as users to be able to get the most information possible to make educated decisions. So you'll see a brand new quick links on the left-hand side here. Everything that's really important is showing up here. So all that stuff that needs to be done on a more regular basis is there at your fingertips. You'll also notice a bunch of new widgets that are on the screen. You'll have the projected goalie widgets. I'll show you the goalies that are about to start for that game, as well as on that right-hand side, a matchup widget showing you how you're matching up against the opponent you're about to play, as well as the conference standings, division standings, your team leaders from forward points, defense points, all the way down to rookie and goalie wins. And then you have your league leader stats as well. And then on top of that, we've added the ticker that's in the trade deadline minigame at the bottom, which will continuously feed you information as you go from screen to screen as well. You're able to access the calendar and then also tab through to go through all the various tabs that you would have had access last year, in addition to a few new tabs that allow you to talk to players and coaches. Going into box scores, we'll bring up all the games that are played in the NHL. So all 1,300 plus games, or if you have a custom league, all however many games you've chosen to do. You can go to any game, not just your own teams. You can go to any game and select a game and view the box score for that game. I can view the events that are from that game, who scored, what penalties were there, as well as the stats for each individual player on both teams, and including the 3 stars as well. So you'll get a really good snapshot of every single game that happens in the NHL. And to feed into that stats motif that we got going on, we also have added new game logs and split stats for each individual player. So if I go into Elias Pettersson here, I can check out his full career stats, and you'll notice that there's a new filter that's shown here, which is full career stats. Now you got game logs and split stats. So if I go into game log, I can look at every single game that he has played in this year, the standard stats that we track from minutes, shots, goals, assists, points, the date of the game, and the opponent of the game as well. So you can see how that player is doing against every single team on a per game basis. In addition, you can also see the split stats. So you can see their last 10 games, their home split, their away split, their division split, conference, and on top of that, their monthly and then their per team stats. So how they have done against Florida, how they've done against Edmonton, Chicago, etc. And then lastly, we've also added an awards tab to the player info, and you'll be able to view any award that that player has won throughout their entire career. So it's not just the last 5 years. If you have Alex Ovechkin, could be something that he won back in the 2010s. All that shows up on this screen and for you to play and look at with throughout the course of franchise mode. One of our biggest fan requests is we added no move, no trade clauses to the game. In addition, we also overhauled our contract negotiation system to fit that in. So now you'll notice when you come into the free agency screen, you'll see an org interest bar. Every single player has a contract interest bar and an organization interest bar, and those will now dictate whether or not a player will want to sign with your team. So if a player has a very low organization bar, you may need to convince them to actually join your team. Those 2 bars now dictate and change who you target in free agency, because it may not be possible for you to get the best free agent because they may not like your organization because of the taxes that you have, the market size that you have, your status as a contender. If they want to be playing on a championship team and you're a rebuilder, they may not want to join your team. Now, you can offer them other incentives. You'll see promises on the bottom right-hand corner and player requests. Certain players will have requests that they would like to have, like playing on the top line power play or playing in the first line. And you'll also be able to give out clauses. So you'll see that you can give out no movement clauses, no trade clauses, modified no trade clauses. You can give out different structures, whether reduced, full. It'll change the number of teams that you can or cannot be traded to. So we've added a lot of depth and a lot of fidelity to the contract negotiation engine that wasn't there before. I'll go into a player that doesn't want to sign with my team currently. Give you an example of what I mean in terms of you have to persuade that player. Now, Sam Bennett here doesn't want to join my team. You're able to do certain actions to potentially win them over. You can charm them, you can gain some organization organization interest if they take to it. So in this case it did, which is great. Now you can now talk about the contract or go into the organization and kind of pitch him on the organization. So if I go into here, I can now pitch him on the market size and the team status and persuade him into wanting to join my team and forego his expectation of preferring to play in a smaller market like Florida. So in this case, it's very risky to do so. It may negatively affect the organization, which may basically mean I'm out of the running completely. But if I do persuade him and it is successful, I can get him to join my team. So in this case, it's successful. And then if I go into organization, you'll see the bar go up to full. So now I have persuaded him into wanting to potentially join my team, which is huge. So he went from not interested at all to being persuaded into joining my team, and now I can go and offer him a contract. The first offer that you see here, the number of years, will always be what that player wants. You can go through and select different years. They may or may not accept a 1-year deal, so if you do select 1 year or 2 years, they may say, I'm not interested in that, and just end the conversation there. But if you go into the 4 years, they will let you go in and start negotiating. So negotiate will try to make a more team-friendly deal. So the higher your organization bar, the more likely you can negotiate a player down in salary. You can also improve the offer if you like. This allows you to add extra money, clauses, promises to your contract offer. So if I want to increase the salary here, I can increase it up by a lot or a little. So I'll add $2 million to a salary. But I can also improve the offer further by adding in a clause. So I can give them a full move, no trade, whatever it may be. I'm going to give them a full no move clause, as well as I'll promise them first line minutes. So he will more than likely now want to sign because I have given him the world. You can also table the contract as well. So if you think you've negotiated a deal with the player to the sense, but you want to try out and sign another player just in case, you can table the deal. There is a risk to this, obviously. If another team steps in and offers a contract to them, they may get taken and may sign with another team. So it's kind of a risk reward on your aspect of it too, whether or not you're willing to take that chance. So in this case, Sam Bennett accepts your offer because it was so good. I gave him a full no move. I gave him $2 million more, and I also gave him a first line promise. So he's now on my team. So I can literally convince him from not wanting to join my team to joining my team through the power of the conversation engine. So next up, with the addition of no move and no trade clauses, obviously when you want to go and trade a player that has a trade clause, you're going to need to figure out what team they can or cannot be traded to. So if we go into Aaron Ekblad here, you'll see he has a modified no trade clause, and you can go into the new contract info screen that shows you the trade clause, the years that are left on the trade clause, and the teams that you can trade that player to. So on the right hand side, there's a tradable team list. He can be traded to 20 teams, and there's 12 teams that he has a no trade for. So if I go to Anaheim or Boston or Buffalo, he is an eligible player for me to actually put on the trade block. If I put him on a team that he doesn't have a trade clause for, I would need to actually convince Ekblad to waive his no trade clause. So you can go into the proposed trade screen, select the player that you want to trade, and it'll automatically have you initiate a conversation with them. You'll see that I'll have to persuade the player into waiving their no trade clause. If failed, which means I can no longer have Ekblad be eligible to be traded to the Carolina Hurricanes. The other way to get them to talk about their clauses or their options is to actually go in through the new franchise hub. So if I went into Matthew Tkachuk here, I have different options to have him potentially waive his clause or change his clause for the year. I'm able to get him to maybe give me a list of 1 team, 2 teams, 3 teams, or outright waive his no trade clause. So I'm going to ask him maybe give me 1 team that he would want to potentially go for. And in this case, he actually did. So now I can go into Matthew Tkachuk's player card and figure out who he actually wants to be traded to. Now you can see that he has a modified no trade clause, but going to his contract info, he wants to go to the Montreal Canadiens. So I can now add him to the block for the Montreal Canadiens, and then you'll be able to make a trade. The conversation engine allows you to kind of have a little bit of flexibility and how much you want that player to waive, whether it be fully waive their clause or to kind of select a certain amount of teams. It allows you to pick a riskier or less riskier option to give the player still some agency as well.
Another new feature that we've added is our brand new conversation engine. You've seen a little bit of it in the No Move, No Trade, but we wanted to make every conversation feel important and have a meaningful impact on your team. So gone are the ice time conversations where players are complaining about things. It's now more of a proactive system where you are now assigning players goals or trying to make that player better or try to fit into your system as you need to. If I go into Korchinski here, you'll notice that there's two options for me to select from: season goal or on ice play. Each of these has their own subset of items that you'll be able to select through. For season goals, this actually influences player development, something that in the past you as a user didn't really have a lot of influence over. Now you will with season goals. So you can select a season goal. You'll have two options of short-term goals. So these are half-season goals. They're shorter goals and they give you less of a reward potentially. And then we have long-term goals, which allow you to perform a stat challenge, an award challenge, and then an X-Factor challenge. These challenges allow you to give a player potentially an X-Factor ability, whether it be a zone or a superstar ability. Award challenges are asking a player to win an award, and by winning that award, they may gain attribute points as well. And then you have stat challenges, which you may ask a player to score X amount of goals, assists, or plus minus or block shots, and they will gain potential ratings impact onto themselves based off of completing that goal. Now, it isn't that it's a hard line, so as long as I'm close, he'll get some of that reward to passing, but he may not get the full amount. So it is really forgiving in that sense, but you do want to get as close as you possibly can to that marker to help influence that player. So in this case, I'll set a goal to have him score 40 assists, and then once that's in there, you'll be able to check out the goal in the morale screen as you sim through a season and you can look at their stats and see how they're doing. Now that I've assigned a player goal to that player, I can also go into the on ice play and potentially have them change their play style or their position. You'll notice on the upper right hand side of the screen that you have something called adaptability. Every player has adaptability rating. This adaptability rating allows us to control how likely a player will potentially adhere to being able to change to a new playing style or a position that they play. The younger the player, it'll actually make it a little bit more easier for that player to be a little bit more malleable and a little bit more easier for them to learn that new play style or position. So an older player will be a little bit more set in their ways and may not be able to switch to that position or play style, but true to real life as well. So in this instance here, we're able to look at these two options of play style and position. I'll select to change his position. It'll give me options to be either straight up, change him out of left defense. I can move him to right defense as well. These are both persuades and they have different factors that weigh in. So in this case, I want to add a secondary position to lower his defensive awareness rating. The harder it will be to convince him. If I want to change his position, players with higher defensive awareness rating will be harder to convince. So players that are really good at defense, they probably don't want to move out from defense. But if the player has a lower defensive awareness, you may be able to get them to change to a forward. Here I'll ask Korchinski to change his position. So in this case, that persuade failed. In many cases, the persuade may or may not work, but you do have the ability to change a player's position and play style. It all has a multitude of different factors that go into it. Again, we really wanted to give you as the user the ability to have more fidelity, more control over the players to fit within the system that you're trying to build.
So in addition, you can also talk to your head coach. You can talk about your preseason or your game plan for the team. And these essentially are buffs to your team that you get for the season, whether it be conditioning, strength training, skill training, 5-on-5 focus, power play, penalty kill, video sessions. So all of these will have different buffs and debuffs. I've selected power play. This will give my team a buff for the power play, but also have a debuff on my penalty kill. So in this case, I got him to adhere to that preseason focus. I can go back in and talk to him also about the game plan that he has. So we can talk about preferred lines. He is locked until the regular season, and I'll get into that as well. Ice time allocation is also locked until the regular season, but this will allow you to allocate whether or not you want your team to roll 4 lines, 3 lines, top heavy. It allows you to kind of manipulate that and have the best possible situation for your team. So now that we're here in the regular season, I'm now able to chat with my coach. So if I'm in the edit line screen, I can hit the Y button to go into strategies and then bring up the coach card from here. I can go into this meeting availability and then chat with the coach about their game plan. So I can now talk to them about their preferred lines or ice time allocation. As that's no longer locked, I can get them to potentially change those things. So in this case, I want him to reorganize or lock players into certain lines. I can now do so. I persuaded them into being open to it. If in the instance where it fails, you can still force the coach to go through this flow. You will lose morale as a trade-off, but at the end of the day, you are the GM and you hire the coach, so you are able to brute force your way through it. So in this case, I want to look at my forwards and I want to have my line 2 center be Elias Pettersson. So if I go into line 2 and center, I can now lock in Elias Pettersson as the center for that line. Now I can also make his left wing. In this instance, I'll just put Jake DeBrusk. And then if I go into that align screen again, you'll notice that when I hit best lines now, those players should now get into that slot. You now see Elias Pettersson and Jake DeBrusk in that role. So if I move Pettersson down to the 4th line here and then I re-hit best lines, it will always lock them into that line. So if he gets hurt and comes back into the lineup, it will remember that and put him back into the right spot. So you can lock all your lines exactly how you want it and really help the usability for playing with injuries on. So you're able to have your lines always constructed in the way that you want them, and the coach will make sure that they do best lines in that manner. It is quite a cumbersome thing. So this was our way with the power of the conversation engine to allow you to actually lock in players into those lines.
Another feature that we added to really help the roster sharing community was the addition of draft picks to the player movement screen. Now you're able to trade 5 years worth of draft picks in the player movement screen to keep up with the real world as you're waiting for the latest roster update from us. So in this case, I can trade Anaheim's and Edmonton's first-round pick to the Buffalo Sabres, and then you'll be able to go in and see that Buffalo has Anaheim and Edmonton's first-round pick, and you're able to upload this roster file to roster sharing, and then you'll be able to have others download it with the correct draft picks, and you can then start your franchise mode when the latest trade comes out and you're waiting for the roster update. You'll be able to make the adjustment yourself and then go into franchise mode and start your franchise mode if you need to.
That's a big change there, as well as we've added a few more elite potential prospects into the draft. Make the league as you get later into later years, refresh that player pool, have the overall be around the same amount as well. So
we added a lot to franchise mode this year. We had a lot of fun working on the game, and we can't wait for you to pick up early access on September 27th.